Hi, hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel. Today we will discuss John Milton's Paradise Lost, Book 10. Paradise Lost, Book 10, published in 1667. John Milton, 1608-1674. Book 10 of Paradise Lost begins with a God observing Adam and Eve's disobedience. Though he had foreseen the fall, he now sends his Son to pronounce judgment. The Son descends to Eden in a radiant glory, both just and merciful. He calls Adam and Eve forth from their hiding, where they are cloaked in shame and confusion. Adam speaks first, attempting to explain his actions by blaming Eve, while Eve in turn blames the serpent. The Son responds by announcing punishments, each tailored to the sin committed and the order of transgression. To the serpent he decrees that it will crawl on its belly and be hated by all creatures. More profoundly, the serpent becomes a symbol of Satan and the ongoing enmity between good and evil. The most significant part of this curse is the proto-evangelium, that is, her seed shall bruise thy head, which is a prophecy of Christ's eventual victory over Satan. To Eve, he declares that childbirth will now bring a pain and that she will be subjected to her husband's authority. To Adam, he proclaims that the earth will be cursed, his labor will be toilsome, and death will ultimately return him to dust. Yet, even in this moment of condemnation, there is hope, especially in the foreshadowed promise of redemption. Following this judgment scene, the narrative turns to Satan, who returns triumphantly to pandemonium. He boasts of his success to the assembled demons, expecting admiration and praise. But his moment of glory turns into horror when he and his followers are suddenly transformed into hissing serpents as punishment. To heighten the torment, illusionary fruit appears before them, promising nourishment, but turning to ash in their mouths. This grotesque scene reflects the hollowness of their triumph and the eternal consequences of their rebellion. Meanwhile, back on earth, sin and death, who have been lingering at the gates of hell, sense Satan's success and decided to build a bridge from hell to earth. This symbolic structure, that is the causae, represents the entry of sin and death into the human world, connecting the two realms until the final judgment. Sin rejoices in her growing power, and death is eager to begin his work of destruction. Their grotesque collaboration marks the beginning of suffering, decay, and a mortality in the human condition. God observes all this and again asserts that while justice has taken its course, grace will ultimately triumph. He commands the angels to alter the heavens and earth, changing the seasons and introducing extremes of weather, disease, and difficulty. Nature itself becomes corrupted as a result of human sin. Adam overcomes with a grief, contemplates suicide, believing death might end his sorrow. But his despair is countered by Eve, who humbly repents and urges him to do the same. And one of the most emotionally powerful scenes of the poem, Adam and Eve fall to their knees together and pray for forgiveness, acknowledging their fault without excuses. Their shared repentance marks the beginning of the path toward redemption. God, seeing their contrition, is moved not to undo their punishment, but to plant the seeds of salvation. He sends his angels to guide and instruct them, beginning with Michael in later books. Thus, Book 10 is a turning point. It deals with a judgment and a suffering, but also with a hope and the beginning of spiritual restoration. It connects the fall to all future human suffering and death, but offers the assurance that divine mercy will not abandon humanity. The intertwined fates of Satan, sin, death, and humankind are established here in vivid poetic and theological terms. Milton shows that though paradise is lost, the promise of redemption through obedience, humility, and grace still remains. Now let's analyze the main themes and critical observations about Book 10. Divine Justice and Mercy. Book 10 portrays God's response to Adam and Eve's disobedience. While divine justice demands punishment, God also tempers it with mercy, foreshadowing redemption through the Son. Guilt and a moral consequence. Adam and Eve's internal transformation is profound. They move from innocence to guilt, shame, and despair. Their emotional collapse illustrates how sin distorts the human psyche and ruptures the harmony of creation. Accountability and repentance. God questions Adam, Eve, and Satan not for his own knowledge, but to highlight moral responsibility. While Satan remains defiant, Adam and Eve show the beginnings of repentance, especially after recognizing their own blame. Corruption of the natural world. The fall affects not only humanity, but the entire cosmos. The introduction of death, labor, pain, and predation into the world reflects the theological idea that sin corrupts nature itself. Satan's hollow triumph. Though Satan returns to pandemonium, boasting of success, his speech ends in a humiliation as he and his followers are transformed into serpents, enduring an ironic parody of the original sin. Gender relations and reconciliation. Adam and Eve's early blame game is replaced by mutual confession, humility, and emotional reconciliation, offering a model of spiritual recovery. Free will and redemption. Book 10 reinforces that while sin was chosen freely, grace remains available. This prepares for the theme of redemption explored in later books. Narrative tone. The tone is tragic yet hopeful, marking a transition from fall to the logic arc of salvation history. Now let's analyze the main chords from Book 10. The first one. So will fall he and his faithless progeny, whose but his own, in great he had of me all he could have. God speaks of Adam's fall, emphasizing that though he had given Adam all necessary gifts, Adam freely chose disobedience. Milton stresses the doctrine of free will, that God does not compel sin and a man is responsible for his actions. The word ingrate highlights Adam's betrayal of divine generosity. The next chord. Justice with mercy. These three words encapsulate the core theological balance of Book 10. While Adam and Eve are punished, they are not destroyed. God tempers divine justice with the promise of eventual redemption. This balance is essential to Milton's vision of a just and a loving God. Now the next quote. Upon thy belly grovelling thou shalt go, and a dust shalt eat all the days of thy life. This curse to the serpent symbolizes Satan's humiliation and degradation. The image of eating dust is a vivid metaphor of frustration, futility, and defeat. It marks a stark reversal of Satan's earlier pride and ambition. Now the next quote. Her seed shall bruise thy head, thou shalt bruise his heel. This prophecy, known as the Proto-Evangelium, is the first biblical hint of Christ's victory over sin and Satan. Though humanity suffers from evil, that is, bruise his heel, ultimate triumph will come through the Messiah, that is, bruise thy head. Milton embeds hope into the narrative even at the darkest point. Now the next quote. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children. This is part of Eve's punishment, introducing pain in childbirth as a consequence of disobedience. And it also implies that life will continue through her and that future generations will carry the burden of her choice. Milton entwines loss with the continuity. Now the next quote. Cursed is the ground for thy sake, in sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. Adam's punishment reflects the now fractured relationship between man and nature. The earth, once fertile and cooperative, becomes resistant and laborious. It introduces toil, hardship, and a mortality into the human experience. The next quote. Dust thou art, and to dust shalt thou return. This stark reminder of human mortality signifies the introduction of death into the world. It echoes the biblical Genesis account and reinforces the fragility of life post-fall. It also serves as a counterpoint to Satan's earlier desire for godlike status. The next quote. To reign is worth ambition, though in hell, better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. Repeated from book first, but Satan's attitude resurfaces implicitly here. While not spoken in book 10 directly, Satan's past defiance is punished here through the dramatic irony of his transmission. His desire to rule results in shame and degradation. Milton critiques ambition divorced from humility. Now the next quote. Instead of fruit, chewed bitter ashes, which the offended taste with a spatting noise rejected. Satan and the fallen angels, transformed into serpents, try to eat a phantom fruit, but it tastes only ashes. This is a grotesque parody of Eve's first bite. Milton uses this imagery to symbolize spiritual emptiness and the bitter outcome of sin. Now the next quote. A monstrous serpent on his belly prone, reluctant but in vain. This line describes Satan's punishment and a transformation into a serpent. It dramatizes his fall from a once glorious archangel to a loathsome crawling beast. The phrase, reluctant but in vain, underscores irrevocable divine justice. Now the next quote. Sin and death amain, following his track, such as the will of heaven. Sin and death eagerly follow Satan's path into the world, now empowered and emboldened. Their presence confirms that the fall has cosmic consequences beyond Eden. Milton personifies sin and death to highlight how evil becomes systemic. Now the next god. The blasted stars look wan, and nature from her seat, sighing through all her works, gave sighs of woe. Nature reacts with a sorrow to human sin, reinforcing Milton's vision of a universe deeply interconnected. Even the stars and the earth lament the fall. This shows that sin is not a private act, but a cosmic rupture. Now the next god. Why hast thou added the sense of endless woes? Inexplicable thy justice seems. Adam expresses despair and confusion at a God's justice, unable to reconcile eternal punishment with a temporary disobedience. His words reflect the natural human response to suffering and a divine mystery. Milton allows readers to confront and contemplate theodicy. The next god. Destruction with the creation might have mixed. Adam briefly considers suicide as a way to end the human line and prevent a future suffering. This line captures the depth of his hopelessness and the moral weight of his fall. Yet this destructive impulse is soon replaced with repentance. The next god, reluctant at his feet, fell humble and embracing them, besought his peace. Eve, in a powerful gesture of contrition, throws herself at Adam's feet, seeking forgiveness and reconciliation. Her humility initiates the return to mutual love and understanding. This moment shows that repentance begins the path toward redemption.